Well, hello everyone. Sorry it's a little late on this episode, but welcome back into another episode of the Broncos Brawl podcast. Hope everyone has had a great week. It's been a long one. It's kind of been slow if you ask me, but I think we'll manage. I think we can get through this one. My name is Keegan Hartman, and you can find me on Twitter at KeeganHartman1. And tonight I am joined by Alex Valdez, as always. One of the OG co-hosts of this one. You can follow him at _Broncos on Twitter. Alex, how's your week been treating you, man?
It's good, man. I'm ready to kick this off. Ready to talk some Broncos and ready to talk some of that fun Christmas stuff we have in store.
2 more weeks. Well, we were gonna, of course, it's not a full band. Byron is traveling tonight, or at least last night. We were gonna record last night. Technical difficulties. We were gonna record Tuesday, but scheduling issues. So third time's the charm, and I'm feeling optimistic about this one. We're off to a great start. So knock on wood, and let's go ahead and get the conversation started. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're gonna begin with one of the biggest topics of the week, honestly. Christmas is coming up in the NFL. The new league year starts March 18th. March 16th, NFL teams can start tampering with free agents, unrestricted free agents. Of course, we are amidst the franchise tagging period in the NFL, which concludes on March 12th. So a lot is going on as we speak. One of the first moves made of the NFL free agency span is, of course, on Tuesday night, when we were originally going to be talking and having a conversation about the combine, the Broncos had other intentions and gave us something to talk about as they went out and traded for cornerback A.J. Bouye of the Jacksonville Jaguars. A.J. Bouye, of course, the Denver Broncos traded a fourth-round pick. That fourth-round pick coming from the compensation they received from trading Emmanuel Sanders back in October. So coming pretty cheap, and then A.J. Bouye coming over at 28 years old, a Pro Bowler back in 2017. Before I get any further into his stats, my man, I got to ask Alex, what was your initial reaction and take from the trade of A.J. Bouye?
I think I made fun of Mike Kliss a couple, 3 weeks ago when he actually proposed this. And I guess I can't go back on it and say it was a bad take on my end. I still feel a little weird about it. I don't know. I feel like they could have, competed for his services in free agency. Pretty much all they did was just ensure that they got him. I don't know. It just seems just a little off to me, trading for a guy that you already know they were going to cut. Usually the Broncos are on the other end of that kind of trade. I don't know. I mean, he's a really good fit. Like I said, I'm not exactly stoked about it, but I understand it. Broncos basically wanted to jump ahead in the free agency line and make sure he doesn't even hit free agency. Cost controlled. He also has zero dead cap money this and next year, so Broncos could conceivably cut him with no consequence. Broncos offered Harris an extension for $12.5 million, and Bouye is making $13.5 million. So Broncos pretty much got their guy. I don't know if he's cornerback one, but they're gonna probably look at him as their quarterback or cornerback one. Broncos got a younger cornerback with a better scheme fit at just $500,000 or $1.5 million more a year. So I don't know. I guess I could be talked into liking it. I'm not against it. I always like when the Broncos pull that kind of trade-off with someone else, kind of get something for nothing when it's their player instead of someone else's.
I guess basically we kind of had a conversation about this last night. Of course, we had some technical issues, but we were able to at least get into this topic. And like I alluded to last night, I essentially said, I was on the fence about it at first, but I'm gradually becoming a believer. I alluded to the fact that A.J. Bouye, when he played for the Houston Texans, he was a part of one of the top 5 secondaries passing defenses in, I believe it was from 2015 to 2017, when, of course, in 2017, he went over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And two reasons why I see this as a pretty good fit for the compensation. Not only does Denver need the depth, and not only is he coming at a younger age and maybe a little bit of a cheaper cost than what we've previously seen, but you also talk about, of course he did play with those. He played with those top 5 secondaries. He was efficient. He was a Pro Bowler in 2017, and he's proven worth. Looking at specifically his 2017 season with the Jaguars, he was what was I looking at last night? Shutdown corner, according to Bleacher Report, at the conclusion of the 2017-18 season. Vic Fangio was really high on him going into the 2017-18 season. He really pushed for the Bears to sign him. Ultimately, that didn't happen. He went to the Jaguars, and him and Jalen Ramsey that year became arguably the best corner tandem in the NFL. So I think that there is something to be proven here for Bouye, and as you alluded to, he will probably very well take up that cornerback number 1 position. But real quick, speaking about cornerback number 1, as I saw on Twitter the other night, it was basically 2 ships passing in the night is the analogy I saw and I laughed at. Chris Harris, of course, this is being speculated as, this is definitely the last straw, and Chris Harris is out the door. What can you tell us about the whole Chris Harris situation? Is there any sort of light, or as I guess most Denver fans are assuming, is it pretty much dim and turned off by now? Is Chris Harris definitely out the door?
Well, the light at the end of the tunnel is the Broncos and Broncos fans could conceivably see Chris Harris getting burnt twice a year if he goes to Kansas City and plays Cortland Sutton, if you want to put a Broncos spin on it. But no, I mean, not to keep beating a dead horse here, no pun intended. We did talk about it last night, but it's just sad to see Chris Harris go out like this. The tone he has on Twitter, it just feels like the Broncos somehow did him wrong. But I mean, the guy just got a $3 million bonus out of nowhere. I mean, the Broncos didn't have to do that. They offered him from, in my opinion, fair compensation. I mean, if we're looking at the cornerback market right now, 12 and a half extension at, what is it going to be, 31 years old for, a guy who did not have that great of a season. He had a great season before that, but he didn't have his 2015 kind of season. I just feel like, I don't know, it's weird that he's going out like this. It's sad that he's going out like this as what's going to be looked at as a villain, not on the, Bill Romanowski to the Raiders level, but having him leave like this as, entertaining Tyrann Mathieu's, call to Kansas City just feels a little weird.
As stupid as hell. And I said it last night when we were talking. I was like, you call upon Tyrann Mathieu and basically tell him after Bouye gets traded to the Broncos, hey, tell your people to call my people and get in touch. Well, dude, first of all, Kansas City doesn't have enough cap space, at last I checked, because they've got so many in-house issues that they're going to have to be tending to. You look at names like Sammy Watkins, who I really think is going to be walking. He wants too much money for them to handle. Patrick Mahomes, every single dollar that they don't spend is going to have to go on layaway so they could be able to build enough compensation and pay their man. That's their guy, and I feel like that's their priority number 1 right now. And then, of course, you franchise tag Chris Jones, but are you going to be able to work a long-term deal with him? So there's a lot of question marks looming within the organization on what you're going to be able to do in-house if you're Kansas City. And likewise, Steve Spagnuolo is a zone-minded defensive coordinator. He runs a zone scheme. It's very few. It's been one of the as I've looked before, one of the better at the zone schemes. That's what he's incorporated into the Kansas City Chiefs defense when he came over from his tenure with the New York Giants. Of course, that was his own scheme even there, but nevertheless, I don't see Kansas City as a home, and that's just not me being a Broncos fan. That's me being like, Chris, how do you see this as a fit? And why the hell are you throwing a fit? Honestly, right. I mean, we've given you so much. 3 years, granted, 3 year, $36 million. I mean, is that to me that seems like a fair compensation? Correct me if I'm wrong?
No, I mean, especially if you look at his last extension, the Broncos extended him right after he was coming off injury. So, I mean, it was a little bit of a risk for the Broncos to sign him to that 5 year, not a usual 3 to 4, but a 5 year extension. And, kudos to Chris Harris for outplaying his contract, but I mean, that's the contract you signed. So why are you upset that the Broncos got value toward the back end of that contract? I don't know. I'm a little lost on it. I hate to see him go out like this. I don't want the Broncos fans to hate him. I don't think they will, but it's just, it's almost, I don't know, cringeworthy to see him entertaining AFC West ideas.
Yeah. And at the same, I mean, I just don't want there to be grudges, because he's grown up with the Broncos for 9 seasons now, and honestly, it was really one off season that dictated his future with the Broncos. Last year, he posted his lowest numbers as a member of the Denver Broncos, the worst we've seen since 2011 or so. It's definitely, it's not fun to have to go through this and move on from another veteran, but then again, it's a part of the business. And so all you can say is best of luck to Chris Harris. I will ask this, with names like Byron Jones hitting the market, what are we going to see for Chris Harris moving forward? What are the numbers going to look like for him? Considering that names like Byron Jones are probably going to want upwards of 15 to 16 million when they're searching for their new home. What do you think Chris Harris might search for or ask for?
Oh, keep going on that Byron Jones, man. It sounds like recent reports are now he's pushing 16 to 18. So you could see Byron, he priced me out of him being a Bronco. I was fully on board with him being a $15 million cornerback one. Lock him up. You can play man-on-man defense on his side, and then whatever you want to do on the other end. You can mix up your safeties. You can do over-the-top kind of coverages with the other guys. But I figured you get yourself a lockdown corner guy who follows your scary wide receiver all over the field. That's not happening with Byron Jones now, because that guy's looking for 17.5 to 18 million. So I don't think that Byron Jones is going to get that. But I can see Chris Harris getting, 14, just a little bit over what the Broncos were offering him, just almost as you could say a slight to them, like, I'll take just a little bit more, or I'll take just as much to go somewhere else and show you what I've got, or something like that. But I don't know. It sucks to see him go out like this. And I hope he gets paid. I mean, the guy, the dog, the badass that was here, the Broncos found him at Kansas. He was a safety, I believe. And that's why he wasn't really even invited to the combine. Didn't really flash in anyone's eyes and nothing like that. They moved him over to cornerback. And I just heard a story today. Champ Bailey, walked over to Jeff Legwold and basically told him, this guy's going to be special. And he had only been with him for a couple of days. He said he's going to be with us long after I'm gone. And sure enough, he was. I don't want to see him go out like this, but I mean, everyone hits that, they always feel like they're worth more than the team is offering. The team offered, I believe, fair compensation. They offered him fair compensation on his last one, which is why he signed it. I can see him going and getting, looking for his last contract. So, yeah, I could see him making 13 to 15. I would say safe numbers of 13.5.
Before I transition into the next sort of part of this conversation, I will ask, do you see a certain team that fits Chris Harris's services, one that you would like to see him go to? Or, I mean, You can go about this either way. You can answer it as one that he wants or one that you think you see fit, or what makes the most sense for him. Who do you think he ends up with when it's all said and done?
I think a good fit is they have some young guys. Chidobe Awuzie from CU. He's definitely a flashy kind of guy. He could use a guy like Chris Harris to kind of hone in his raw athleticism down in Dallas. And plus, it'd be nice to get him out of the AFC. I don't know, man. I'd like to see him get paid. Obviously Dallas has its own, contract restraints going on with Dak. But yeah, I mean, why not? Why not in Jerryland?
Yeah, well, Jerry's World is taking quite the economic hit right now with all the things they've got going on. But transitioning to our own issues, maybe in-house, I wouldn't really call it issues, but shopping spree, if you will. So on our shopping list, they're still saying, even after the trade for AJ Bouye, the Denver Broncos will still be evaluating the cornerback position, progressing forward in the free agent market, as well as into the 2020 NFL Draft. I want to start with the 2020 free agent market. Plan B, Plan C. Who do you think another name is for Denver as they progress into the free agency? The real part of free agency, I should say, when it actually commences.
Broncos are now sitting 3 out of their 5 spots filled in the secondary. I say 5, not 4, because I include that nickel cornerback spot, which is, I mean, in today's NFL, it might as well be a starter. You got your strong safety, Kareem Jackson, your outside cornerback, 1, AJ Bouye, nickel cornerback, Bryce Callahan, which, Broncos and Broncos fans alike are all, crossing their fingers hoping that he's 100%, because I was a big fan of him coming over. I didn't realize his foot was going to be this tore up this long. Broncos are still looking to get Simmons back into the fold, either by a franchise tag or long-term contract. And then there's the other obstacle of finding someone opposite of Bouye. I don't believe I see a lot of people saying, oh yeah, well, there you go. You've got Bouye and you've got Callahan. Callahan is not an outside corner. I need people to understand this. The guy is going to work inside in the slot. He is your Chris Harris replacement. He's going to just, stay inside the slot. He's going to bump, tight ends into Simmons and Kareem Jackson's territory. And then he's going to cover your slot receivers. Many have speculated Prince Amukamara, former Bear, and Fangio defense playing corner, who was just released from Chicago as a cost-cutting move. He thrived in Fangio's zone heavy scheme 2 years ago, but again, had a down year this past year. Broncos are banking heavily on a couple reclamation projects, and it paid off with Kareem Jackson, even though they moved him over from strong safety. Let's see. I'm not against Prince coming to Denver. I'm not against a huge pay to another person in the secondary, though, because if you're thinking about it right now, if they don't get him for a vet min kind of deal, after they get the deal done with Justin Simmons, the Broncos would have paid more than just around, I should say, 25% of their entire cap to their secondary, and that's not even including, bringing in, that last piece. The cornerback market, super saturated right now. You've got guys like Byron Jones, who's going to break the bank, our beloved Chris Harris, and then I would say those two are borderline at the top. And then you've got guys who have been relatively either consistent players or consistent, flashy kind of headline names like Ronald Darby, Logan Ryan, and then James Bradbury coming out of nowhere asking for $15 million. But you can find an average to above average cornerback starter for next to nothing right now, and that's the route I would go. Bringing back a guy like, Devontae Bosby, which the Broncos will not tender, but do have interest in bringing back, according to local media. And then you have other guys like, who are low risk and high reward, like Jimmy Smith, who just came from the Ravens, dealt with a little bit of injury issues in his, Elder Smith kind of years playing there. Darqueze Dennard, who I believe came out in the same draft as Bradley Roby. I could be wrong, but he has been playing a lot. He actually figured it out later on in his career. Josh Norman, another reclamation project. I know a lot of people are like, oh, no way. But I mean, we're talking about a Josh Norman at, $3-4 million on a 1-year deal. Eli Apple also figured it out. Trey Waynes, undersized guy from Minnesota. I don't know. I'm just picking out a couple guys. Like, let's roll the dice on these guys. Maybe you hit on one of them. I can honestly keep going on names that could come in and be more than serviceable in a scheme that is more safety and nickel dependent than straight up man-to-man on dependent. I'd much rather go after a cheaper vet and draft someone behind him to group him for, next year, and maybe even sign. As I say it, I'm still iffy on it myself. Maybe a guy like Jonathan Joseph, who's up there in years, but maybe sign him to a 1-year vet min deal and draft a cornerback in day 2 of the draft.
Okay, now of all those names that you mentioned, I know there's a few there that you mentioned, quite a few, I should say. Mm-hmm. Who of that batch, you're John Elway, I'll put you in the shoes right now. Who are you tending to first? What is the most pleasing name if you're the Denver Broncos? What's the first name really you're going to be looking at as a plan B, plan C situation? And honestly, either one, plan B theoretically, I guess for this conversation's sake. Plan B, who are you tending to? Who's your priority now?
Man, my priority before Byron Jones was Devontae Bosby. I thought that was a foregone conclusion, just bringing him back in. The guy was showing out before he got hurt. It was a freak accident. Nothing like that is going to happen, on a regular basis. And it's not like this guy has a long history of injuries. I fully expected them to at least place, an original round tender, which he was undrafted, I believe, or close to, which would have been, a low round tender. You could have got the guy for next to nothing. You would have had your 2 cornerbacks in place, and then you could have figured out, just one other of these, plan C kind of cornerbacks. I just didn't understand why they hate Devontae Bosby. Okay, they don't hate him, but they do have interest in bringing him back. I just figured that was just a foregone conclusion, but apparently they needed to see more, and they wanted to see more. And as far as like the flashy names here, a Jimmy Smith, he was balling out, a year ago? Not last year, but a year ago, just out of nowhere, and then he's just battled, injury after injury. I don't know, man. I threw it out there on Twitter, and I threw out Josh Norman, and everyone just killed me over it. I mean, you're talking about literally, in my opinion, a vet min deal. Teams are going to be looking at him in that kind of way. What happens if this guy, gives you that flash in the pan 1-year deal to get you into your rookie cornerback next year?
I'm going to say this. I know that we were talking about all those names. There was one you kind of that I would understand why you kind of overlooked this one, but I really like this. The more I read about it and the more I do my research. What about a name like, and I know I'm going to get bashed for this. What about a name like Jason Verrett for the San Francisco 49ers?
I've got written down guys that I want the Broncos to look at. It is Jimmy Smith, Darqueze Dennard, Josh Norman, Eli Apple, Trey Waynes, and the one guy I just refused to list just because he could not stay healthy was Jason Verrett. But I did have him on my list. The guy, man, he had all the potential coming out of college, and the guy just cannot put 16 games together.
I think I know because 2015 we would have drafted Shane Ray. 2014 it would have been Bradley Roby's year. That was a guy that Denver was really high on during that year, and instead they went with Bradley Roby in the first round. He's been plagued by injury his whole career, but in a 25 game span, I think I was reading the other day, his first 25 games. It was some crazy stat. 25 games, he had 5 interceptions, but for 3 seasons he dealt with injury with the Chargers. And then, of course, he signed a 1-year prove-it deal with the San Francisco 49ers last season. But if you can get him for low compensation, something along the lines of a prove-it deal, even if it was just for depth at this point for the Denver Broncos, if I'm the Denver Broncos, it'd be something to evaluate. I understand Achilles. I mean, he's literally okay, I wouldn't call him an Achilles heel, but I mean, like, he's literally been dealing with injury frequent. But I just feel like if you bring him in on a prove-it deal, what do you got to lose?
I guess the only thing that I would come back with, because, I mean, like you said, those first, year and a half he was playing, I was like, man, that's the guy we should have taken over Bradley Roby. But, I mean, you also have to remember the 2 big names they just signed last year. Juwan James didn't play because he was constantly injured and then got injured. And then Bryce Callahan brought in, constantly injured and got injured. And one of those being a cornerback. So, I mean, would the Broncos roll the dice again, sign another hurt player with huge, laundry list long injury list like Jason Verrett? I'm not sure they would. That's why I just couldn't throw him on there, because as much as I would like to see, just sign him to like a vet min deal and, let him ball out and earn himself a huge contract next year. I don't know, man. I don't see them throwing their cash that way.
He did make the Pro Bowl back in 2015, which arguably was one of his only healthy seasons that he had in a Chargers uniform. But I mean, it wouldn't hurt to keep that name in mind. But transitioning for time's sake, finally on the back end of this conversation, you have to look at the NFL draft. I know, of course, we kind of got into this conversation last night, didn't really go in too much depth, I don't believe, but it certain names that come to mind when you think of this cornerback class. Of course, there was a kid out of TCU I know you alluded to yesterday. Go right ahead with who you're pretty high on coming into this draft, to maybe for Denver to look at in the later rounds of the NFL draft, maybe even early.
I've got a couple guys here. So I've got my big draft Twitter crush in Cameron Dantzler from Mississippi State. Is a guy I've been high on for a long time, who didn't exactly pop off the page at the combine, which could benefit the Broncos a little bit if they were looking his way in the draft. A leaner guy, not afraid to tackle, not afraid to mix it up with anyone. I am not sure why teams are just refusing to put him in that top 32. I see everyone putting him in the top 50, and at that point I'm like, okay, everyone is putting him in the top 50. Like, what's going on here? If everyone's putting him in the top 50, I mean, who's knocking him out? I mean, I think he's got just as much panache as Fulton from LSU. He's not going to be Okuda, but I mean, Henderson ran a quick or a fast 40 and showed off his talents, but I thought Cameron Dantzler was the better coverage corner in college than Henderson was. So, I mean, I have him in my top 4, top 3 guys, and definitely have him as a top 30 player in this draft. So if Broncos can snag him at pick 46, I am all about it. And then you have a guy like Jeff Gladney is a guy everyone loves but refuses to put in the first round. Same thing. Can mirror with the best of them and isn't afraid to tackle. Struggled once against a taller wide receiver, and people have him labeled as an inside nickel slot kind of cornerback. I don't believe that to be the case. And then you have the off-season darling cornerback in Troy Pride, kind of a player who has done nothing but help his stock since ending his college career. He shined at the Senior Bowl, and from all accounts, he impressed in private interviews. I love the guy's fight, and obviously, if he's doing nothing but helping his case, it almost, you almost ask, what did he have around him at Notre Dame? So I don't know, man. I just feel like this draft and this scheme sets it up to where the Broncos don't have to go super high for a cornerback, But I mean, if one of these guys falls into your lap, I mean, how do you say no?
You know what? I agree with you on the. I kind of zoned out. I listened to your points, and you brought up good points. But I was looking at Jeff Gladney, and I was kind of thinking, last night. I'm gonna be honest with you on some of these corners that you brought up in our conversation last night. I was like, man, I got to do my research. I YouTubed Jeff Gladney today, and I watched a little bit of film, and the man is fast. I will say that the man is quick. He's a little shorter, and I think he had some off the field issues, and that kind of held him back from being a first round pick. Size, and of course some off season or off field issues. I couldn't remember specifically what it involved, but 5'10", 191 pounds, pretty fast. Another name that I looked at today. Of course, I brought him up yesterday, Bryce Hall. And here was the thing that I kind of read about Bryce today. He's more of a man coverage corner. Zone he can play, but it's not really his forte rather than man. Very smart when it comes to the game. And then also the fact that he had the most in 2018, the most pass breakups with 21. Again, I don't know how he would fit in Fangio's scheme, but if he's there, I would not see why you maybe take a look at him. Of course, he was projected. He's one of the top. I'm looking at it right now. One of the top 6 according to CBS Sports in terms of corner stock. And from what I've heard, if he doesn't get hurt in his last season with Virginia, being last year, then he's a first or second round pick. Right now, they're projecting him 3rd. So could be something to evaluate. Of course, that is where we have a good chunk of our picks there in the 3rd round. So that could be something to evaluate if Bryce Hall does indeed fall to our lap.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, people are deservedly so really high on this wide receiver combine or draft market. But what's overlooked is the cornerback market. You've got obviously Okudah, who's going top 5, top 7, if whoever's at 7 is lucky. You got Christian Fulton. You've got my guy Cameron Dantzler. You've got C.J. Henderson. You've got Trayvon Diggs, who I know a lot of scouts who have undeservedly so just looked at where he was drafted or where he's coming from and said, oh, last couple guys from Alabama are a little so-so, I'm not sure if we can really, put that into context. I don't understand it. You always watch the name on the back, not the name on the front. You got a guy like Jalen Johnson from Utah, a Jeff Gladney, of course, A.J. Terrell from Clemson, showed a lot of heart. Bryce Hall, ya boy. I am not even going to attempt his name, the guy from Auburn. This is 10 guys deep, and I haven't even touched on some of the later guys that I'm really enjoying. I just don't understand why I've actually had people hit me up and ask, are the Broncos would they trade up for a guy like Okudah? I'm like, no, there's zero reason to play or to draft or to, trade up for anyone in this draft outside of, a Chase Young falling to number 10. And that's when you pretty much just have to thank your lucky stars he's there and then cop up pretty much all of your 3rd rounders and maybe a 3rd rounder next year. But I mean, we're talking about a generational kind of guy. In my opinion, there's no other generational kind of player in this draft outside of Chase Young. So just let the draft fall to you, man.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think, with all these names, because the more I look at it, I'm going to tell you this right now. When I did try to sit down and focus on some of these cornerback prospects, some of the first film in general of all the prospects that are in this draft, it was cornerbacks. So, I mean, you bring up a good point in terms of the fact that the corner representation is right up there with the defensive line representation. It's right up there with the wide receiver representation in this year's draft. And I think it's going to be pretty dense. But my question is, let's say theoretically you kind of miss out on Bosby and you kind of miss out on a free agency opportunity. I don't see that happening, but we'll play the what if here. what do you think about Denver maybe evaluating a corner at 15 if the chance comes of it, if it needs to be evaluated, or maybe could Denver maybe trade back a little bit and look at the cornerback position? Is there a chance?
I think when you're sitting that high and you're already looking at a guy like, say Ruggs isn't there, which, I mean, if there's not a more foregone conclusion pick than, Ruggs to Denver, then I'm not really sure what there is. But I mean, they're not afraid to trade up. They're not afraid to trade down, as we saw with Paxton Lynch, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I could see him trading down to get some value, but I mean, they already have a ton of third-round picks. So at that point, you could see Elway making multiple trades, multiple days. But I don't know. I just don't see a guy there at 15 unless it's Okuda that's going to be there. At that point, I just hope, a guy like a Diggs or a Dantzler is there at 45 or a 46. Even a guy like Christian Fulton, who, in my opinion, was much better than Grant Delpit in that secondary, but somehow Delpit gets all the credit. I don't understand it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I just let the draft come to you. I mean, you've got that Gladney, 6 foot, he can handle big, tall wide receivers just fine. I've seen him do it. And then you've got guys like Darnay Holmes, who definitely can be your Chris Harris replacement at 5'10", $192. And then, your guy Bryce Hall. I just keep going on guys that I can fit into, especially this system that, doesn't require you to, follow a guy all around the field, match up against, Julio Jones all game long. This is passing guys off in zone coverage. This is trusting your teammates to communicate when you're going to be releasing guys into their zones. This is very cornerback friendly system, and I would not overdraft for a guy at 15.
Well, all great points, very, very dense in the cornerback position. Of course, we're going to have to see what happens in free agency before we kind of jump to the conclusion on what might take place in the actual draft when the day comes. So kind of putting a pin in that and switching gears, I want to talk about a story that's kind of developed over the past 24 hours, and that is Trent Williams, the famous, I should say, left tackle, famous tackle for the Washington Redskins, 7-time Pro Bowler in his career, the first-round pick out of Oklahoma. Need I say more? This guy has been nothing but a phenomenal football player, one of the best offensive tackles, if not the best in the NFL. Finally got his wish granted of seeking a trade out of Washington. That was granted yesterday. Denver, of course, before the trade deadline last year, he missed out because of I guess they had spotted cancer. He had cancer, some form of cancer last year, so it put him out for the season. Denver was linked to his services just before the trade deadline. People were saying, this is a trade that's got to happen. Trent Williams and for Denver, it would be great for both parties involved. Going into the rest of the free agency, going into these next couple of weeks, do you think there is a chance? First, I should ask, what do you think of the connection? And then second, do you think there's a chance that we could potentially evaluate, hell, maybe even sign the aforementioned Trent Williams?
I will give you one name to solve that question, and that is Garrett Bowles. The guy is not going to figure it out at this point. And then on the opposite side of that spectrum, Trent Williams has been a top 2, top 3 offensive tackle since he joined the league. So the guy he's not injured. The guy was not injured because of some kind of football injury. The guy had a brain tumor from what I understand. So we're not talking about a guy that, is coming off of an injury or is rusty or is anything like that. I mean, the guy in his last season playing, he allowed 1 sack that was, I believe, 75th in the league as far as offensive tackles go. And if you're, doing the math, that's incredible. Especially in, what is that, 491 pass blocking attempts, and especially when you're blocking for, who is it? I don't know who their quarterback was in 2018. I mean, it's the Washington. It's the Redskins at this point. So, man, I don't understand why people don't understand. We have been looking for a franchise quarterback for, what is it? Jay Cutler's our closest franchise quarterback that the Broncos have ever found, drafted, and developed. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Jay Cutler has been the closest the Broncos have ever found, drafted, and developed. We finally have our guy in Drew Lock. Everyone sees it. The Broncos see it. His teammates see it. Can we protect this guy? Can we protect our investment? We have a cost-controlled quarterback for the next, 3 years. Let's make a run at it, but let's do it smartly. Let's not hinder his performance or his injury, history. He's already jacked up his thumb once. Can we protect our investment here and, get yourself an elite left tackle, which if we're going by John Elway's, history here, he has not had the best luck at signing, offensive tackles. We're talking about Menelik Watson. We're talking about Valdir. We're talking about Okung. It's just been a revolving door on the outsides. Even Jawan James. We just need to find a guy, sit him there, and forget about him. And it's, okay, he's 31 years old, I believe.
Yep, but 31.
Yeah, Andrew Whitworth is playing at a high level at 36, 37. Jason Peters was just let go, and he played, a year after ACL surgery just fine. And he was playing at 35, 36 years old himself. So, you're not exactly talking about a position that just falls off the cliff at 30. So, I don't know, man. If it were me, I would protect our investment. I would throw every single, hoss in front of Drew Lock and, just tell him, hey, here's an extra second, which in the NFL is, a minute to evaluate what's going on defense. Yeah. I'll go with the guy who, hasn't given up a sack since 2018 versus the guy who just, whose nickname is Garrett Holds.
That's gotta suck.
That's man.
Really gotta suck.
If it's sad because I've gone to Bronco games twice this last year. It's sad that you have to hold your breath every time a holding call is called and you're just ready to, I'm sorry, I'm that fan, that booze offense number 72. It's come on, man. You are way too old for this. Especially when, you could see it on film. The guy's taking way too far of a step back. They're running the hoop drill on him, and then they work back inside. And, of course, at that point, now you've got to hold because your quarterback's about to get smeared on the turf. So, I don't know, man. We have, one of the offensive line gurus, but, can the guy be taught at this age? The Broncos drafted him at age 24 as it was. I think the ship has sailed on Garrett Bolles. I don't know, man. I just want to get out of that. Just get out of that.
Well, you bring up a good point. Believe it or not, and I was looking at Garrett Bolles. Honestly, when Denver drafted him, he's 27 years old now. Is what my point's going to be. So he's kind of around the same age. I know 27 and 31, maybe in NFL talk might be a little bit of a difference. But if you think about it, it's really not that much of an age differential. And you look at, of course, you bring in Mike Munchak. What was it, a little over a year ago, last offseason? You bring him in to help the offensive line, a guy who took the 31st ranked offensive line in the Pittsburgh Steelers and made him a number 1 ranked offensive line over the duration of maybe 2 seasons tops. So quite an impressive marker for Munchak. But I want to look at, Trent Williams. So I guess Andrew Mason did a survey on Twitter, and it was, what would you consider acceptable draft capital compensation for the Broncos to surrender if they traded for Washington tackle Trent Williams. 3% said first round pick, 31% said a second round pick, 51% said a third round pick, and 15% said a day 3 draft pick. I think a third round is reasonable. What would you say?
I would happily cough up a third round for an elite all-pro left tackle.
I mean, given the fact that he had the unfortunate circumstances last season, but I don't feel like he's missed a beat. According to the video that Adam Schefter posted yesterday of him working out last week, I don't think Trent Williams has really missed out or been set back. He looks like he's in pretty good shape, and he could still toss around a defensive end or two, or even an edge rusher for that matter. I think he can still come in and be effective, especially with the coaching guidance of Munchak.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we're talking about a guy, please, I know this is going to sound a little bit insensitive, but he's dealing with a brain tumor, not a football injury. So, I mean, the guy's not taking incredible hits, or he's not, recovering some kind of like issue that's just going to linger all season long. The guy did not have any kind of hits on his body. He took, you could even make the case that he's a year younger in football terms. So, I mean, we're talking about a 30-year-old left tackle still in the prime of his career. I will take that.
I agree 100%. So, segue to something else. So, the thing I love about NFL Christmas is I was one of those cliche. It really hasn't grown on me. It just now grew on me maybe like a couple years ago when I really started to understand team needs. But I used to be one of those people that was like, oh, dude, wide receiver, running back, looking for those big names and those people that were the sexy picks, if you will. And then, I started to look at the team needs, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is great in the sense that ... we need to get better at this position. So I've matured over the years is what I'm trying to say. But I'm a little excited. There's the little kid in me that's excited that we are looking at maybe bringing in some running back depth. And I want to ask you, what does this mean for the running back depth that we have currently, in that maybe not necessarily for Philip Lindsay's case, but looking at Royce Freeman and Devontae Booker? I know I heard that Booker's probably good as gone. Thank God, if you ask me. But Royce Freeman's workload might be reduced. Hell, he might be the third running back on the depth. I'm going to shut up and let you give your side of the story. What do you think about this whole idea of bringing in a running back this offseason?
Royce Freeman as a third string running back sounds amazing to me. I mean, you're talking about the guy who led the team in catches out of the backfield. I'll take that any day. Especially at his size, one of your your top two guys goes down. You've got a guy like Royce Freeman just sitting there. I'll take that. Broncos looking at upgrading or adding to their backfield in free agency of the draft options. Tons of options to add a little bit of thunder to Lindsay's lightning, you could say. In free agents, they can look at a guy like Theo Riddick, who they already had on the team, and then just out of nowhere, dude just, I don't know, he was healthy for tons of time in Detroit and then comes here and gets hurt as a pass catching back. He was one of the, elite guys, before, a guy like Austin Eckler got his contract today, actually, a little bit of news.
Yeah.
Or a guy like Carlos Hyde. I don't know. You could look at a guy like that if you're looking for something, a little bit more concrete and consistent, who's bouncing around, had a great year last year with Cleveland. But honestly, with me, I'm never, ever, ever wanting to shell out big money to the running back position or the linebacker position, because if we're looking at two positions that just throw their body around and just literally have no, they really can't take any kind of precaution when it comes to taking hits on the field, I'm never going to want to give big money to those kind of positions or draft capital in that case. If that's the way we're going to talk, then let's look at a guy like A.J. Dillon, maybe in the, maybe the 4th or 5th round from Boston College. personal favorite of mine. Most view him as a tweener, halfback, fullback. I view him as LeGarrette Blount. I don't think the guy needs to be at fullback. I think you need to get him on the field and just pretty much just forget that he, forget that he was a fifth rounder and treat him like that first rounder. Just give the guy just multiple touches. Just keep pounding the rock with the guy. He runs mean. I can throw out a couple GIFs on Twitter. I'll do it this week just to make everyone else fall in love with him. He literally threw someone down like he was in WWE, threw him off him, went for another 20 yards. Just a beast of a running back, and is a mean running back who just finished with all kinds of attitude. Or if we're talking about, which kind of a more responsible kind of take here, if we're talking about that kind of thing, then we're talking about Antonio Gibson from Memphis as far as a Pat Shurmur offense. He played behind another running back there, but caught a ton of balls from the slot and out of the backfield. He ran with the wide receivers at the combine. I'm not sure why. Maybe, it's better money. Like I said, I wouldn't want to give a running back a ton of money, but ran a 4.39 as a converted running back to wide receiver. He can be so dynamic, but we'll need time to learn in a pro system. Coming out of that Memphis system. Hello, Paxton Lynch. And, of course, blocking and hot routes and option routes. Once he does, he's going to be a scary player at the next level. I don't care where he goes. I would love to see him in Denver. I have a feeling the Broncos will look to the draft before they look to free agency, though.
You talk about you brought up a reference to LeGarrette Blount, and I believe that was, you had mentioned he was from Boston College, correct?
A.J. Dillon was from Boston College. I believe LeGarrette Blount went to Oregon. I'm guessing.
I was going to say, first of all, looking at, I'll go ahead and break this down from free agency, then I'll go into the NFL draft. So looking at who they've got on the market right now, in terms of free agency, I look at names like Kenyon Drake. Drake is going to be testing the market. Not Drake. What am I thinking? Melvin Gordon, of course, that's been a name that's tossed around. I was really high on Austin Eckler, dude. He had the most receiving yards of any running back last year, and I just knew that he was probably going to be the guy to stay if it was going to come down to Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, just because of the fact that he was so efficient last year. And last year was, it was a contract year for him. He went from making $500,000 to, getting what'd you say, $15 million, or what was the compensation that they had agreed on this year or today?
Those exact numbers I do not have, but I know he got paid.
And I believe that was a four. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know the numbers, but I was thinking it was a 4-year deal for some reason. But nevertheless, that was a guy that I was like, man, if you could get him for the right dollar, geez, I'd kill to have him in Pat Shurmur's system. And plus, he's from the Colorado area. But I look at in terms of players in free agency, and besides that, I don't know. I'm on the fence. Part of me would say you could take a look at Melvin Gordon, and then part of me is like, how does he impact? There really isn't a correlation when you look system-wise. I don't see how he'd be efficient. What do you think about a name like Melvin Gordon coming to Denver? I don't see a fit.
Really? Yeah. You're looking at a Zeke Elliott kind of contract too. I'll take Melvin Gordon on my team any day. It's the contract that we're talking about. And you also have to remember that the Broncos are on the verge of extending or, pay raising Philip Lindsay. So right there, you're going to be, coughing up more money toward the running back position. That's why I say, let's lean toward the draft right now, because you already have your smash and dash kind of guys in Freeman and Lindsay. Now you can go to your draft, and now you can say, okay, let's find some special. Let's find some freak athlete to, pair with these kind of guys. That's why, I don't know, pulling a guy from the free agency just doesn't make too much sense to me, especially a guy like Freeman or Gordon, who's just going to get paid. And I don't think it's going to be it's definitely not going to be in LA, especially because that bridge has definitely been burnt.
Thank you, Austin Eckler. The name that I thought of when you said LeGarrette Blount, and I watched this guy's tape the other day. I like Marcus Warren out of Cincinnati, and I just here's the reason why I gravitate to Marcus Warren. He's got highlights of C.J. Anderson, and he's just a powerful runner with his big body. Looking at he's 5'11", 222 pounds. He's just powerful in the legs. Keeps his feet going. I watched him against Boston College. Trying to find his stat line right now. Seeing looking right at it. He's got 105 yards off of 21 carries, and then his long was 14 yards. Looking at receiving. Okay, maybe not seeing too much as far as the receiving side of things, but I looked at him as far as a power runner, and I was like, maybe if this guy's in the later rounds, he could be someone to evaluate because he's a bigger back, and maybe in terms of grounded pound, I liked him. I feel like more so he might not be able to be one of those guys that can catch out of the backfield. I don't know, kind of just a spitball there. He was one of the names that came to mind when we talked about the running back position being addressed in the draft. But the more I think about it, the more I talk about it. Maybe not so much. But any other names that you could think of? I'm 0-3 tonight. Thinking of names.
Did you say Michael or
Marcus? Marcus.
Oh
Warren.
yeah, I think you're looking for Michael Warren II from Cincinnati.
Yeah, Michael Warren. Excuse me.
I got you. I was like, man, who is this? Because I have not heard of this guy. But yeah, I don't see why not. Broncos. I like a guy like Zach Moss from Utah. I've seen him comped to Kareem Hunt. I love that comp. The guy is just mean as hell, and he will be one of those kind of guys that gets flagged for lowering his head and initiating contact just because he's just trying to lay the wood every time he's got the ball in his hand. No regard for his own safety, which I know it's terrible to say, but I love seeing that, just team first, score first, glory first. I love that in a kind of guy like that. So why not? I mean, especially because the Broncos, they brought in one of the top three guys. I don't know if it was Taylor Dobbins or his name escapes me, or Swift. But the fact that they're kind of looking and sniffing around the top three kind of guys like that makes you wonder, what is going on with, do they want to feature back? Do they want to start splitting Lindsey out into the slot if he can work on his hands? He had no problem with his hands at CU, but for whatever reason, he comes to the NFL and he's on that struggle bus with the whole catching the football out of the backfield. So if he can move to the slot, can you imagine a wide receiver, Philip Lindsay out of the slot? That'd be awesome.
I will say this. I'm going to retract my statement a little bit because the more I look at Melvin Gordon, okay, I know the Ezekiel Elliott comparison is there, but looking at him over his past, especially in last year, believe it or not, he was one of the best running backs out of the backfield last year, catching out of the backfield. Looking at it in 12 games, he had 66 targets, 50 catches, 75.8% catch rate, 537 yards, and averaging 9.8 yards per catch. This wasn't last year. This was the year before because he did have his holdout last year. So I honestly, looking back on this, I would not see why Melvin Gordon couldn't be a potential option to maybe look around, maybe sniff around. I know I've heard that there's been a connection there in terms of Melvin and Denver, or at least the preconceived notion, Denver's gonna sniff. They're gonna at least sniff on this one because of the name.
The only reason I would want the Broncos to sniff on that is just to drive his price up for someone else. As much as I would love to see Melvin Gordon in Colorado, I don't want to see that contract in Colorado, especially because you hear the rumblings that the Broncos are going to go super heavy offensively in the draft and then super heavy in free agency. I just don't see them spending too much already after they spend money on Philip Lindsay on that little bit of a pay bump raise. There's a lot of media types out there speculating that he could get a deal similar to Austin Eckler, which I don't believe he deserves, unfortunately, just because Eckler is the total package where Lindsey needs to show, again, that he can catch out of the backfield. Maybe we're looking at a bump up to 4 to 5 versus his $3.25 million that he's making right now, which, I mean, yeah, he's outplaying his contract, but he's also not offering you that scary bit out of the backfield. So yeah, Melvin Gordon sounds fun. I don't want that contract anywhere near Colorado.
I almost laughed because I was thinking that the San Francisco 49ers, and this is not the case, but I would have thought, man, what a name. With all the running back situations that they had, I was thinking that Jerick McKinnon was one of the names that they were going to let walk. I know this is such a random thought in terms of this topic, but it would have been nice to bring back one of Pat Shurmur's old boys, so a running back that he would have worked with. I know LaShawn McCoy is going to be hitting the market. He's an unrestricted free agent for Kansas City. There was a little bit of a connection there in the sense that LaShawn is one of the better catchers out of the backfield. Age has plagued him, so is injury, but nevertheless, he was on one of Shurmur's teams when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you also have to remember, you still have that young quarterback who's still figuring it out. I mean, I just heard today that Patrick Mahomes admitted that he barely learned how to read defenses midway through the season.
I heard that.
So, I mean, if Patrick Mahomes is barely learning how to, figure it out and read defenses, Drew Lock, as much as I love the guy, I mean, he's still raw. I mean, we're still looking at a guy who played 5 games. So I don't know if I want LaShawn McCoy around Drew Lock at this point. He misses one read or, LaShawn McCoy's open in the backfield and Drew Lock takes a sack. I don't want to see that sideline.
You're selling me more and more on what we could see in the draft. I like that. Thank you. Well, can you believe it's already been an hour and maybe 2 minutes that we've been cutting up on some football?
Oh man, we need to start doing doubles. Doubling up on the week, man.
Top of the hour, we're heading into a whole nother cycle. Well, unless there's anything you wanted to add real quick, might have to put a pin on this. It's up to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple things we got to talk about. Broncos did tender Wilkinson. They are going to have him start at that right guard position. I love it. We have talked about it before, but he's definitely more of an inside guy. You have to remember that the defenders come at you just a little bit faster as opposed to the outside where you've got an entire field, or, if you're on the right side, you've got an entire right shoulder to account for. You've got, everything. You've got feet that you've got to be fast with, You don't have to be fast with your feet inside, but you do have to be fast with your hands inside. And I think that's what Wilkinson offers you. So right now, their offensive line is set. I don't want to say that too happily, knowing Bowles is still on the team. But it is set outside of the center position. And then, oddly enough, it sounds like Mike Purcell had more than enough team sniffing around him that the Broncos had to bump that tender up to a second-round tender. Which, kudos to him. Another guy from Colorado just grew up right down the street, Highlands Ranch in Colorado.
Yeah.
Kudos to him. From what I'm told, 10 teams were ready to pounce if the Broncos didn't tender him. Not too keen on signing an expensive nose tackle. That's why the whole DJ Reader noise that I was hearing just didn't make sense to me. You have to remember, a nose tackle, especially in the Broncos system, Purcell played 38.8% of the snaps. I don't know. I don't want to spend too much spending that kind of money on a guy that's not going to play more than a glorified third of the snaps. So, if we're talking about, any kind of, shopping list, do you have anyone that you're looking at?
I'm going to go ahead and say this. Of course, DJ Reader, behind maybe Aaron Donald, arguably is one of the best defensive tackles in the league. I would say he's probably up there, at least not if that's too high. I would say top 5. So another name I'd be looking at is I'd I'd look at Hargraves from Pittsburgh, and I'd also look at Michael Pierce from Baltimore. I know that his name has kind of been flowing around a little bit, and quite frankly, how he's been able to fit in and step up. Of course, they've got a lot of competition on that front seven or the front line with the Baltimore Ravens. Brandon Williams, who actually went to the same school as Rod Smith, Missouri Southern State University. I saw him play, but Michael Pierce, he stepped right in and he's been able to come in and play really solid at that defensive tackle position. So much so that last year he actually got more reps than Brandon Williams at the defensive tackle, the nose position. So I think that could be a name, that could be a connection with the Denver Broncos, being able to look at him and what he was able to do and step up. I saw one of his workout videos, dude. This man's 340 pounds, and he is jumping 40-inch boxes. You can't make this stuff up. This guy is huge, and he is just, I'm jealous at how in shape he is for being as big as he is. And I'm like, really? I can't even jump that big of a box. But nevertheless, he's an animal. So
well, I do want to suggest one guy that no one really talks about, but he did play. He played in Fangio's system, and he's coming from the Bears. I know we're just refused to get away from this whole Bears to Broncos scenario, but I'm diving right back into that same scenario. Is a Nick Williams. The guy's hitting free agency, and he was a freak last year in limited time. I don't know. He feels like a great fit in Denver, where he just, he can play that two-gap system, take up tackles, and then occasionally come in and wreak havoc in third down. Whether they sign Derek Wolfe or not, he could be your three-tech defensive end.
I will say this real quick. I'm looking at his stats, looking at Michael Pierce's stats, and looking at last season, his grade maybe wasn't the best out of 69, but then again, you're splitting reps with a dense defensive tackle, nose tackle position for the Baltimore Ravens, but the year before he had a PFF of 90. So, maybe not his best season last year, but years prior, he's proven success at playing the defensive tackle position, the nose specifically, when he's been on the field. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. There's so much depth with the Baltimore Ravens. It's a pretty heavy rotation with Baltimore. So just a name to think about and keep in mind with how he's been able to step up in Baltimore. But as far as that goes, man, I think defensive tackle is going to be another big thing besides the corner that will be a point of emphasis for the Denver Broncos, if not in free agency, definitely in the NFL draft. Going back to the combine, a name that I thought of constantly was Javon Kinlaw. I watched that man literally annihilate single-handedly the Missouri Tigers game plan out of South Carolina. This guy's an animal. I think he's another name that you could evaluate in the first round if Henry Ruggs or the offensive tackle position in general doesn't go accordingly. Javon Kinlaw single-handedly, go back and watch tape from the South Carolina-Mizzou game. This guy made us change our game plan entirely. Just how fast he was with his hands and how quick he was to get off the line. And I love his story. This man grew up homeless. He comes from a humbling background. So just a name to keep in mind, Javon Kinlaw, dude. If nothing else, I really like him out of South Carolina for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, I think he said he went to the D2 school. He didn't go there to go to school. He just went there just to get 3 hots and a cot over his head. The guy, one hell of a story. And you know me, man, people know me by now. I am always going to be team first and future first. And that means, going things as frugally, I should say, as possible. And I don't know, man. I'll keep leaning on this whole Nick Williams to Denver bandwagon. The guy brought you, 6 sacks last season, and I don't even think he was a starter most of the year. So, yeah, give me that, and give me Kinlaw. And I think not Andrew Brown, but Brown just had one not great combine, so his stock could be falling too. So if his stock falls, that means, that could push a Kinlaw definitely to 15. That could drop him lower, and you can trade back and get a Kinlaw. Man, I think the there's so many options to better the Broncos themselves this offseason. Can March 18th just get here already?
Hell, can the draft get here already?
I mean, 49 days, I think. 49 days? 50?
I can't wait to go to Vegas, man. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't, man. No. All right. Well, as much as I'd love to do a second and a third and a fourth hour with you, I mean, there's not enough time in the day, my man. So, great conversation. And as always, everybody listening at home to this long episode of great conversation, make sure you follow the both of us, Alex Valdez. Make sure you follow him at @V_Broncos on Twitter. For me, make sure you follow me at Keegan Hartman1. And if you didn't guess my name from my Twitter handle, it's Keegan. And of course, the man that we are missing heavily today, he's traveling, but next week he's going to be back in action with us. Make sure you follow Byron Chamberlain at BC_Chamberlain on Twitter as well. And next week, Alex, I could very well be calling you from the SEC tournament. I will probably be covering that. I will be out on assignment, but that doesn't mean the party doesn't stop. I will be right back here next Tuesday with y'all, ready to talk some more Broncos.
Awesome, man. Go ahead and rub it in that you kind of cover that kind of stuff, that you'll be there, that you'll be right in the thick of March Madness, but, it's cool.
Honestly, okay, so here's a funny stat before I get off here, and this is it. When Missouri has played this year, when I've called their games, they are 4-0, but I'm not expecting a long trip. I'm expecting to be done the first round, and I know it bugs me to say that, but I don't expect to be there for that long in Nashville, but won't be surprised if I'm there for longer than 1 day. So fingers crossed, I should say.
Can you come and call some of the Nuggets games? Because I don't know what Michael Malone's deal is, man. He's just not playing my boy MPJ, man.
I'm not liking it. I'm not liking what I was seeing with that Golden State game, man, but that's a different conversation.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and sorry for keeping it on so long. We appreciate you guys being so patient. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you right back here next Tuesday. For Keegan Hartman, he's
Alex.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. You've been listening to Broncos Brawl. God bless.